during this conference and in previous conference, there's a nutrition discussion or debate that seems to happen, which is a lot of speakers recommend eating a whole food plant-based diet. And there's a large number that recommend eating beans, whole grains, seeds, nuts, fruits, and vegetables. But they are not very, they're definitely against oil, and they kind of want to minimize nuts and seeds and olives and avocados. So they're basically, even whole foods, plant fat, they're saying to minimize, and oil completely, don't have it all. Then there's another group that says, no, fat is actually good. You want nuts and seeds, you want avocados and olives, and oil is okay. So where do you stand on avocados, olives, nuts, and seeds as one category of plant fat, and then a second category of oils like hemp, flax, and olive? Are these things that are part of the diet? Are these things that are not part of the diet? Please help us share what you think about this. All four of you.
I'll jump in and take avocados, and I'll leave all those other food choices to the others. We can circle back. Just depending when you're listening and watching this, but if you're watching it live, just within the last 10 days, the Harvard School of Public Health published an analysis. Believe it or not, it's amazing. But in 1982, they started the Physicians' Health Study and the Nurses' Study involving over 100,000 medical professionals who agreed to fill out insanely long health and food questionnaires every 4 years. And they followed that group up for 32 years, during which about a third of them died, and some had heart attacks, strokes, and other events. So they can analyze what's the impact of anything in the database and do the multivariate analysis. So they looked at avocados in a publication presented to the American Heart Association. And what they identified is, when you factored in blood pressure, smoking, diabetes, obesity, all the things you have to do to isolate a single nutrient, that eating 2 half avocados a week reduced the risk of having a heart event over 32 years by approximately 20%. And they couldn't find anything negative about it. And we do know avocados are richer in fiber than most people give credit to. They're very rich in plant-based nutrients, chlorophyll, and the rest. They do have a small amount of saturated fat, nothing like butter or lard or coconut oil or palm oil, but it appears, at least in these big studies, not to impact, ultimately the most important measure, lifespan and early coronary death. There are other studies about avocados having a beneficial effect on endothelial function and cholesterol. So they were excluded from those famous studies, Dr. Ornish, Dr. Esselstyn, Mr. Pritikin, even Lester Morrison in Los Angeles 50, 60, 70 years ago. So there's been relatively little actual heart disease reversal data on avocados. That's why the Harvard School of Public Health data is important, and I vote yes, but stick to the study, 2 half avocados a week, and always check with your doctor and your nutritionist first.
I'll do a quick screen share.
Sure.
I'm going to agree with my colleague, Dr. Kahn, on the avocados. Here's a study. This is let me just kind of show you the study. We looked at the defined plant-based diet in clinical patients in the approach in 4 weeks. We showed a reduction in lipoprotein A. We're actually the first in medical literature to show that by 16% in just 4 weeks. And other inflammatory atherogenic lipoproteins were reduced. And just quickly regarding the foods they ate, I'm not going to go through this whole list, but if you look at the avocados here, and again, this is not really a fair assessment, but they went up by 800%. It was a 9-fold increase in the consumption of avocados in 4 weeks in this population. Now, they reduced animal proteins and got rid of a lot of bad things, so you can't just say it was an increase in avocados. But the reason I just point this out is that, at least in this study, in our center, in the acute, and this is a group of patients with hypertension, hyperlipidemia, their body mass index was about 34, 35 on average, and they were pre-diabetic, average hemoglobin A1C. We saw a reduction in hemoglobin A1C reduction C-reactive protein by 30%, reduction lipoprotein A by 16% in just 4 weeks. And so that increase in consumption of avocados. Now, the amount of fat they had in this diet was right at 20%. So it was not what you call that so-called 10% or super low fat diet. It was a 20% fat diet. But what we emphasize is that all the fats be raw. So to answer your question directly, I say, I would say yes to the whole fat foods, avocados, whole seeds, most nuts. Have a favor for pistachios and walnuts, and seeds such as pumpkin seeds, and then, but yes, and even olives if they're not overly processed. I say no to the oils, because extracted oils can be problematic, even if it's the first cold pressed oil. It's you don't know how it's extracted. If it's truly extracted first cold press, but then it sits on the shelf, it becomes rancid. And then the oil itself is missing a lot of ingredients, a lot of fiber and other things. So the whole food, the fat from the whole food is important. My emphasis is that the high fat content foods must be raw. They must be minimally processed, in my opinion. So that goes to the avocados. Don't roast them, don't steam them. Eat them, fresh, raw on your salads. Same with your olives, same with your seeds, nuts, etc.
Thank you.
I didn't know if our gastroenterologists want to grab any of the foods. I'll just say, again, trying to keep it in the science world because we're all academic trained docs. The Gates Foundation, I think that's what you call it now. You don't name the couple anymore. The Gates Foundation has that study called the Global Burden of Disease, 190 countries, 3,000 investigators, and tens of millions of people tracked for their nutrition and their outcome. And they reported about 4 weeks ago, the 3 top foods for longevity in this massive nutrition database. Number 1 was beans, number 2 was nuts, and number 3 was whole grains. So it kind of blows away the plant paradox, killer lectin, whole grain as a uniform, harmful group. It certainly questions some hesitation about eating nuts that has occurred in certain heart disease reversal diets. And I agree with Dr. Montgomery. Walnuts for their omega-3 fiber, endothelial function. Pistachios really support nitric oxide production. So they're kind of a super Viagra and pretty fun to eat in the meantime. Just don't eat the whole bag. And beans were number 1. And that's not the first time beans have been identified as the top longevity food. It's sort of the blue zones example, but actual academic research says yes to those things too. In the same global burden of disease study, all meat and processed meat were at the bottom of the list for the 2 foods most associated with shortened lifespan. So it's consistent with pretty much everything we're saying.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think it's fine to eat avocados, nuts, seeds. I am not aware of any GI literature that suggests that it is harmful to the gut microbiome. All the research that I have seen shows that it is supportive to the gut microbiome. I also probably deal with like a little, maybe similar population, but to try to talk to my patients about whole food plant-based diet, this is a new concept for a lot of my patients. And so, when we know that stress also negatively impacts the gut microbiome, it's really tough for me to get my patients on board on like a super restrictive diet. So I really try to encourage them that on a plant-based diet, on a high fiber diet, I want you to have variety of foods and I want you to eat different ones. And so I do include whole grains, fruits, vegetables, seeds, nuts, avocado. I feel like the research supports that. And if they start getting very stressed out or they feel like it's restrictive, I also let them know that's harming their gut microbiome. So really it's kind of a balance to make sure that you're eating healthy, but that this diet and this change is a lifestyle. It should not be causing you excessive stress. You should not feel extremely restrictive because then you're almost just doing yourself harm that way. So I think I haven't seen any research, like I said, to show that it's harmful to the gut microbiome. So I encourage my patients to eat those.
Is seeds and diverticulitis real?
I was
hear it
just
every
going to
day in
say
the
that.
clinic.
That
Or
was
is
why
it-
that's why I was unmuting. That is so
Okay,
funny.
okay.
I
Good
tr-
question.
that was a huge thing that we see a lot because that was people were told not to eat popcorn, nuts, or strawberries or diverticulitis. And I tell patients all the time, no, I want you to have all of these things. The data that's been debunked, there's no data that tells us that puts you at a greater risk for diverticulitis or episodes of or bleeding, diverticular bleeding. They are frustrating diseases because we don't have a thing to make people not have those events, but those are not things that we know that cause them. So yes, I tell my patients the same as sort of everybody on the panel here is to have your healthy fats via avocado and nuts. Because my space is very much an obesity space, I tell patients not to go overboard. So please not to eat an entire, bag of almonds or an entire, while you're sitting and replace that with your chips with a bag of almonds. So we talk about portion control a lot. And another thing I think in GI space as well, as Dr. Pasricha said, is trying to get patients to sort of understand this as a lifestyle change and sort of slowly taking them on their journey. If I tell everybody that came in, they had to be plant-based, they can't eat oil, everything had to be raw, they'd all go running like with hair on fire. So it's sort of slowly getting them there. And the fun part is we start to get them on board, their microbiome actually starts to change. So they start to crave those things that I want them to eat. And they go, man, I don't want soda anymore. This is strange. I know what's happening. Your microbiome is changing. You're changing things that you crave. And so I know I'm going to sneakily be able to get them there till they get to a point when they start to see those weight loss and changes that they want to stick with it. So I kind of have to start where we can and sort of slowly grade my way up when we get people talking about switching how much oil and oil in general. So, but agree with everybody else of keeping patients. Avocado oils, flax, chia, I love them all.